Hello and welcome to the Best Practices for Implementing or Changing Your CX Support Solution webinar. My name is Kate Remelo and I am Zendesk Partner Marketing Manager. Today I am joined by Graham Silverman, 729 Solutions as VP of Sales and Partnerships. 729 is one of Zendesk master partners who has completed over 120 successful Zendesk implementations. We have worked very closely with Graham and his team and are excited to have him here today to share his experience with you. We are also joined by Asa Engel, one of Zendesk's senior solutions consultants who is an expert in how Zendesk works. As far as what you can expect today, we will introduce you to 729 Solutions, explain migrations and workflows, share best practices, provide recommendations for optimization, and then we will finish with a Zendesk demo. We will have time for Q&A at the end of the session, so you can drop any questions you have into the webinar's chat and we'll answer them during the Q&A portion of the webinar. With no further ado, I hand the floor over to 729 Solutions' Graham Silverman.
Thank you, Kate. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Kate, you got sound for me?
Yes, you sound great.
Great stuff. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I know you've got a million other things to do and it's a crazy and difficult time. So I appreciate you taking the time to join me and Asa today talking about how you can get implementing or getting a new customer support solution up and running or improving the one you have. So I'm going to try to, there we go. So we've got a few different, got some of the stuff done. I'm going to talk about migrations. I'm going to talk about best practices. Then I'm going to pass it to Asa, who will run you through some content, and then we'll have some conversation afterwards. So my name is Graham Silverman. I'm the head of sales and partnerships at 729. As Kate said, we're a master partner of Zendesk. So one of my responsibilities is to make sure that our engagements are successful with Zendesk. So who are we and why should you listen to us and why do we know anything? We've been around for 17 years. We're based in the Bay Area. We have folks around the States. We have become a Zendesk master partner after many years working with them. We work with Zendesk as a contractor, as a subcontractor for their customers and for them too. And we've done a lot of different projects in this space over the last few years. So we have a special focus on CX software, CX integrations and implementation. And we're a systems integrator. So we know quite a bit about how to wire up different tools and what you should be thinking about. So here's some of our recent customers with Zendesk. We work with some of the Zendesk biggest customers. We also work all over the place, mid-market, SMB, but we figured we'd show you that we have the experience to be talking about this subject together. All right, so let's get stuck into the content here. Why would you be moving? Well, we first thought about putting this deck together because of the end of life of desk.com. So Salesforce's old product desk was ending, and that was kind of where we started. And that might be a reason for you. Lots of different products, legacy products are ending life. And if they are, and you're not going to get support on them, it's really a good time to make a move while you can. We definitely see people moving because they just don't have the feature set to do the jobs that they need to do in the current environment. Obviously, lots of folks are coming off legacy software. Legacy software, you know, by its nature will end, needs support, and is hard to maintain. And so people need, you know, to be able to do things as a CX team. You often don't have the developers you need to do stuff. So having a tool that pretty much does it by itself is really helpful. Limited integrations, we certainly know a lot about this. Many products out there don't have the over 1,000 integrations that Zendesk has right now. So if that's the case, you have to hand build every single one. That can be a good reason to change. And then the other reasons are just users are having a tough time. Agents don't particularly like it or have a struggle with it. And or you don't even have one yet. And you're using maybe a shared Outlook with a bunch of Excel or Gmail. So for all of these reasons, these are great reasons to change software. You would not be alone with any of them. So when you're thinking about considering moving, obviously the first step is to think about your data. What data do you have? Where is it? I think it's really good to do a self-audit, go and have a look. We have a migration form. You can always reach out to me and I can share that with you. It's a really helpful tool that sort of helps you dig out where all your data is and what is it. The next and more tough question is, what value does it have? We really, these areas of value, cleaning, what's worth moving are about how old is it? Is it relevant now? Is it about related to current products, current customers or partners? So it's a really good step before you move data to have a good look at what you've got and decide what's important to move, and don't move things that don't need to be. Some companies just want to dump everything in there. We don't recommend that. It just creates a little bit of a mess in your new system that you had in your own. So taking a minute to clean your data is worthwhile, and that's something that generally companies need to do internally. No one else knows what data would be important. Security, it is extremely important to think about how you're going to transfer that data in a secure way. We do not want to be given data that is not PCI, PII compliant. You should not be transmitting data in a way that you haven't thought about. So make sure that you understand how data is going to move between the two systems. And lastly, what's the new data structure? What data is valuable and how do you want it to relate to other data? So that's an evaluation we help customers do a lot, and it's really key to making sure that it's going to be a success. All right, so different kinds of migrations. We'll talk about a few different ones here. You've got a couple of different choices with your regular user customer data. One-time cutover, which essentially means you're going to move it all over in one go. It's generally cheaper and quicker because you're obviously getting it all ready and moving it over. However, if you're moving this from in a live context where you're not going to run your old system and you're going to straight up cut over into a new one, you really need to prepare, test. It's a lot more risky to move that over. The second choice is what we would call a delta migration. So you do a small migration first of some sample data or a good chunk of it, make sure that looks right in Zendesk or your new tool, and then run the new tool for a while, maybe a couple of weeks, while your old tool is running. And then you move the second amount, either all of your data plus any of the open tickets in. The pros, of course, is the ability to test, deal with any problems, make sure you've got it right. It takes a little more time and it's a little more expensive because you've got two migrations. But in our opinion, that is the right way to go. We don't favor the one-time cutover. It can be much more dangerous. Then on the other side, we've just been talking so far about sort of user data. You obviously, many companies have content to move to. Again, what are those sources? Where all does it live? Many companies have that content in lots of different places. You might have some in some WordPress. You might have some in some other content repository. Trying to kind of amalgamate all of that content into one place and then maybe clean it up, edit it, make sure it's valuable, identify what new content you need, identify the content structure, what are the different categories, and then again, move over a small amount. This would be moved into what the Zendesk calls the guide or knowledge center. So making sure your guide is set up right, that would be extremely important. And we've moved, data from all kinds of services, pretty much every other one that's out there, and all of the different types of content, CSV, Excel, all the different places. So we know a little bit about that. Spend more time before you move it over. All right, so we dealt a little bit with the migration, but once we've got our new tool up, how's it going to make things better? And the answer is workflows. Everything in your customer success system should be based on a quality workflow. Workflows for your agents, for your users, this is the most important thing to be thinking about. The step one is to evaluate the current pain points in your existing workflows. And if you want to know about current pain points, ask an agent. Ask anyone who's doing this work. What do they have to do that's repetitive? Look at what time they've got available, what they have to do that's difficult, what other systems, and what new workflows you might want. So always, thinking about that. So do you replicate your old workflows or not? In my opinion, the answer is no. moving to a new CX tool is the time and opportunity to get a better workflow, to really think about what wasn't going well and how you can make it better. So again, if you want to find the pain, ask an agent. Start with questions like, what do you have to do over and over again? What's repetitive? What things are difficult to do, where you need to pull in multiple systems, open a bunch of different screens, find resources that are hard to find. I'll ask these three different groups. What's repetitious? How do you get resources to handle your tickets? And what kind of reporting can you put in place to see whether a workflow is good or bad? So I mentioned content in the guide a minute ago. Zendesk has a great feature, which is that they have an agent-facing guide. So most companies out there would have a user-facing knowledge base, but Zendesk also has the agent-facing side. And we find this an incredibly valuable tool in quickly handling tickets. So all of your resources, all of your permissions, groups can be handled through the guide, and all of the content that an agent would need to handle a ticket. You can customize the guide to face different kinds of groups, like only your partners, specific subsets of partners. You can keep onboarding material there if it's an HR use case. So it's a really useful thing to do to build out an internal guide. Let's keep moving. Bad customer workflows. All right, well, there's a million reasons why a workflow can be bad, and we'll talk about kind of bad for you, bad for them. So in terms of a customer, obviously, as they arrive in your support center or they arrive in your help, your website, if they cannot find content quickly, that's going to be, tough for them. If the content they find is poor, irrelevant, doesn't help them do things, that's going to also be a bad experience for them. If they have bad experiences, guess what? They're going to try and get hold of an agent. So every piece of bad content or hard to find content is going to push more tickets to your company. So if it's hard to get hold of an agent, on top of that, that might be a tough way to go. So we've all had those struggles where, as a user, we're trying to figure out how to do something. If you want to improve, you've got to think about how you're going to improve that customer experience. Come in as a customer, do some customer testing, see what that workflow looks for. So what does bad for you mean? Well, bad for you really means that they're not self-serving. They are trying to initiate contact in a way that you might not want them to. So we have customers who are high-end e-commerce customers. They want to speak to everyone. We have other customers who are much more low-end transactional. They want to speak to almost no one. They'd like them to self-serve and deal with all of their customer support issues themselves. So think about self-serve and deflection. If you don't handle those properly, you will get too many tickets or tickets coming in from the wrong channels that you can't resource. So if you want people to get on the phone with you for important things, then you need to decide what those are and how to open up those channels in the right way. We recommend custom forms in your support center. Custom forms allow you to decide what the user, partner, etc. needs to deal with, and then you can allocate that ticket to the right person. So for the user-facing guide, now we're talking about the knowledge base that's only for your users. These are some of the things you should think about. Importantly, branding, obviously. We built a lot of themes that allow you to kind of drop your brand in. You want to make sure the support center is heavily branded and the user knows where they are and what they're doing, especially if you have multiple brands. Automation. You really want to pass the user through to a workflow that's going to automate how you're contacting them, automated emails, etc. Self-serve is vital. People are getting used to doing things themselves. And if the content is available in the right order, in the right way, they will try and stay online and do it themselves. Integrations are valuable if you have data or sources from other places. So we've built, guides for the user where they can come in, get their invoices from QuickBooks, or look at other data in Xero, or whatever other business tools you use, you can present in a customer portal for your users and have them, again, self-serve that stuff. Effective search is key. So tagging, making sure that your content is effectively tagged for keywords is going to make all the difference to whether or not they're going to self-serve, whether or not it's valuable. And then good reporting. So that looks like making sure you understand what content is valuable to people, what people are looking at. Zendesk has some great tools for basic reporting that comes out of the box on the user guide, so you can see what knowledge-based articles people like. All right, so I'm going to dig into integrations for a minute because every single business uses multiple tools. So we're going to try and manage that. So traditionally in the software space, and we've been in the game for a while, there's been more of the oxen and plow methodology. That's one big tool, your kind of Oracle or Salesforce tool. There's one massive tool that tries to do everything. It's slow, it's unwieldy, but it digs a big furrow in the field, and that's what it has to do. The newer method is what I call the dog pack method, where you wire up a bunch of different tools that all do one thing or one and a half things really well, and together they achieve the effect you're trying to do at a much greater speed. So if you're trying to move fast, clearly we want to put a dog pack together, and in order for the dogs to run together in the right way, they're going to need to be integrated well. So it starts with looking at all the different tools an agent needs to use. Maybe they've got to go to Jira and Slack and 5 other different ones they've got. Invoicing, they might have custom ones that you've built. How much time does it take them to go to all of these different tools, find the resources and the customer information they need? If they can't quickly find user data, how are they going to be able to handle chat or phone requests? If it takes them 5x times to close a ticket, then you're going to need 5x agents to handle an increasing load of tickets. So really, we make the case for integrations based on agent time. The return on investment is massive. If you take the amount of time it takes for a single agent to handle a single ticket, multiply that out by your number of agents and your number of tickets, you can quickly make a business case for wiring up all of your tools well. And Zendesk has many tools that come out of the box in the marketplace. So there's lots of things you're not going to need to build from scratch. You're just going to have to implement them in the right way. All right, reporting. Most people look at reporting once they've got it up. They're like, let's get this new tool set up, and then once it's running, we'll check out, we'll figure out the reporting. I would strongly recommend that that's not the right approach, and that actually it's much better to start with reporting before you get going. So in your current system, who would like to see things? What does the executive team want to see? What does the admins need to see? What does the customer support manager need to see? So identifying your stakeholders, identifying what information they want to see and how would be useful to them and on what cadence. Maybe there's a weekly executive meeting that they need to see certain bits of information. Okay, great. Let's make sure that we tag that information from the start and know that we're going to be presenting this information in a pie chart once a week to the executive versus a live manager who might need to see a completely different set of data on an ongoing basis, maybe user availability, agent availability, etc. So figuring out reporting from the start is the smart way to go. All right, channels. So channels are really any way that a customer can get hold of you. So we have the channels on the right side there. And my 3 questions are, who do you want to speak to, when, and why? So you need to, if you can identify an important customer or an important question, that's someone who you'd like to maybe talk to or chat with. If it's a lower value task, maybe want to push those people to email. If you have more of an e-com business, you know, SMS, social might be more important to you. If you want something to happen very quickly, like maybe you've got a business that deals with medical issues or emergency, you might want to build SMS in as a channel so that you can deal with people in more real time. So thinking about the channels and when and how you're going to implement them is going to save you a bunch of time and really a bunch of wasted time for your agents. If you have your agents helping people with resetting passwords over the phone, it's not going to go well. Thinking about your channels from the beginning is kind of key. All right, optimization. So most people, again, think of optimization as something that happens later on down the line. Let's get the thing in first, then we'll optimize it. But actually, if you're really smart about this thing, you should be asking questions like, how are we going to learn from the start? Meaning, how are we going to get reporting in very quickly? What do we need to learn? How often will we review, and what kind of action will we take? So, how does our availability as management line up with what information we're going to get? We recommend strong training of the tool at the beginning so that the admins have experience, quality reporting set up from the start so that you can look and go, okay, this content's not working, great, let's change it immediately. Let's look at this once a week, once every 2 weeks for 30 minutes, and within that time, we're going to be able to take clear actions. All right, so 729 Solutions is strongly aligned with Zendesk. We did a very deep dive into many CX tools as we pick best of breed tools. As a systems integrator, we can't afford to work with tools that aren't the best, because if they don't integrate well or they're not quality, it doesn't create a good experience for our customers. So we found that Zendesk had a really good combination of price, speed, available integrations, right? We don't want to be building things that are already out there. It's a very, very agent-focused tool, which we like, and it's easy to stand up. So while we do help customers implement the tool, each module, it doesn't take what some of the other heavier tools take, which can be 3 to 5x what Zendesk can take to set up. So for all of those reasons, we think Zendesk is a great tool. And I'm going to pass it to Asa right now. Asa is a great guy. I work with him on a regular basis. He's a senior solutions consultant. I'm going to stop sharing screens, Asa, so you can grab this. And please, show folks some workflow stuff and all the things they'll need to know.
You got it. Thank you so much, Graham. All right, folks, I've got a couple slides I'm going to talk us through, but the majority of what I'm going to be walking through is the actual product. So bear with me through a couple different slides here, just to sort of set the stage of what we're going to be walking through. I've got some kind of foundational pieces that we need to communicate a little bit. Graham, can you confirm you can see my screen? Just want to make sure.
Yep, I can see your screen.
Thank you very much.
The play mode.
Yeah, I'm not even going to flip out of presentation mode just because I've only got 2 slides.
Oh, well, fair enough.
As Graham said, I am a solutions consultant on the Zendesk end. So, primarily I work with our direct customers. I also work with our channel team as well. A little bit of housekeeping before I jump in. Quite literally housekeeping. I am working from home, as are many of you. So there's a chance you might hear a couple of my coworkers in the background, my 3-year-old and my 6-month-old. So if that happens, I apologize ahead of time. I'm also going to be moving very quickly. I've got, 25 minutes or so to get through what usually takes me about an hour and a half. So also going to apologize for that I will be moving quickly. That said, we do have daily demos, which are going to be much more in-depth, right? They'll have more time to go through the actual products themselves. So this is one option, right, where all of you can go and sign up and tune into one of our daily webinars and do a similar format to what we see today. Obviously much more in depth and have more time to spend in certain areas. And then another option is also, of course, to get in touch with our sales team. Obviously, you'd have a counterpart to me also involved in that process as well, and they can get real deep and obviously customize a presentation around exactly what you're looking to do. Again, a couple slides I just want to talk through. This slide here is really just to kind of open everyone's mind and make sure everybody's aware of the fact that Zendesk is very open and extensible and flexible and nimble, right? So we work in a lot of different, of course, industries and different spaces. There really isn't a niche that we do work in. We're kind of spread out all across different verticals and industries. But at its core, there are 2 kind of fundamental use cases that we typically run into. And we could break those down into an external use case, which what most folks are oftentimes initially familiar with Zendesk on, in the traditional customer support, right? I'm a website, I'm a e-com provider, I'm a retailer, et cetera. And I've got customers that I need to support. Another very common scenario for us is more internal use cases. Top of the list in that category would be internal IT. So, in fact, a lot of our customers will use us in sort of a hybrid approach. They'll use us for both external as well as internal. So I kind of put these in here just to sort of plant some seeds and make sure you're aware and kind of, as I go through different stories here, I'll try to interject or overlap a few different use cases as we go through it. But wanted to make sure that was communicated. Graham also had a slide around our channels. This is usually where I kind of introduce the channels, mainly because in the 20 minutes that I've got, I will not be able to cover all of the channels. So I do want to make sure that you're all aware of the channels at least. And again, we can get deep into each individual channel in follow-up conversations. As far as the demo goes, though, I do also want us to sort of put our frame of mind around 3 different users. Let's say 3. We might even talk a little bit about this 4th here. But the first maybe 5 to 10 minutes or so, we're going to go through that customer experience and take a look at how they would use Zendesk, right? That experience that they go through. And typically that involves our self-service portal, which we call our guide product. So we'll start off there, and then we'll flip over into what I call the back end of Zendesk. Technically, that is the agent interface. That's where, of course, support agents live, administrators, right? The architects, the designers of the account, reporting purposes would be managed in that back end as well. We might have a little bit of stories around developers and how they also work within Zendesk as well, too. All right, so let's go into actually take a look at the product here. Again, we're going to start off in that, what I oftentimes call the front end of Zendesk, where those consumers would be using and accessing the tool. This is their dedicated portal. When I say they, again, keep in mind, these end users may be consumers, end users that you're supporting. They might also be internal folks, right? Folks on your team. This portal that offers knowledge, allows us to submit requests, and among many other things, might be used for internal purposes as well, right? You might have a dedicated portal just to have that sort of institutional knowledge that you guys have across your teams. We might not share this out publicly, but it's for us to use internally. Now, I'll give you a quick glimpse of this. This is just a tool I use internally just to help me showcase a lot of different help centers out there. There are literally thousands of examples we could send you as far as help center sort of looks and feels go. A lot of these brands you might recognize as well too, but hopefully what we're seeing here is that obviously you have full control to create and design the aesthetics and look and feel, and of course the use cases and experiences within each of these. Again, lots of examples we could send your way. In fact, you could probably Google any of these help centers and Zendesk and you'll find those as well. So I'm going to talk through a couple different of the main components of this front end. Again, we can't get too in the weeds today, but I do want to just give you a good sense of what the main components here are out on the help center. Of course, the idea of knowledge, that I can go and search for things like, find information around password. Of course, I could actually misspell that, and we'll even do a fuzzy word search and find that for you as well. Of course, articles within Zendesk are managed within sections. Those sections are within categories, and you can make this as complex as you need to, or it could just be a simple single page of maybe 10 FAQs, all the way on up to the other end of the spectrum of like full documentation, right? Training material, training videos, etc. Now, I am an admin of this particular account that I'm in right now, so I've got a toolbar up top that gives me functionality to do things like, of course, customize the design, manage the content, right? Show me a list of articles that maybe have gone through an approval process that are waiting for me to approve that information and approve that content. Again, we give you some out-of-the-box templates just straight out of the box. In fact, you can even check out our marketplace and buy themes and kind of source around what other folks have used and sort of commercialized into our marketplace. But you also do have access to come in and customize the themes directly into that source code, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The other thing I'll mention too is that in this example I'm in right now, of course, I'm logged in as an admin. You have the control to set up the access levels on each one of these very specifically to your needs. So I could say, let's have a full help center that's open to everyone, and anyone can come in and access that link. Or if it was locked down, right, quite commonly in like an internal document storage capacity, we might have internal documents that we don't want to expose out. So once we lock that down by permissions and logins, we can even fine tune it to the point where maybe certain types of visitors have access to certain material, right? If these customers I work with have these products versus those products, we don't want to show them those other products. We just want this very fine-tuned and specific to the content that relates to that user. That's one example of how we might segment out that content. The other main component within that help center is this becomes an access point. So this is actually, in fact, a form or a channel, right, to where I could customize each of these forms and fields to ask different information. I'm going to go through this very, very quickly just for time's sake. There's a lot of concepts around ticket deflection. You can see I accidentally clicked that link there, but when I type in my subject line, this is actually a very simple form of ticket deflection. We have much more complex variations to this, but essentially what we're doing is scrubbing those keywords as they type in that subject line and deflecting them out, hopefully, to go look at that article that shows them how to reset their password, right? I'm going to go ahead and fill this out though, and I've got a little trick to speed that process along. Now these forms and fields are totally customizable. There's no code development ever required to build out these forms, right? If you've ever built like a Google form or any kind of web form, it's all easy, what you might call drag and drop or WYSIWYG editing within that. I'm going to go and fill this out very quickly though, just to get us through that process. Now, of course, the information that we're gathering at this point is likely going to be used on the back end as we receive that request. If a ticket comes in and we see the keyword password in that, and it's this type of customer, and they've told me it's related to this problem or issue, right? We might perform some actions, right? Assign it to this group, respond to them with this message. What we're seeing right here is actually a much more complex variation of ticket deflection. If those of you that follow the news on Zendesk, you may have heard of our product set called AnswerBot. This is one particular flavor of AnswerBot. And what this does is this actually, right, I actually submitted in that request, and you can use your imagination, and maybe some agent is looking at that ticket right now. But me as the end user, I'm offered up some recommended articles, and this uses actually machine learning and AI technology to analyze that content and really get a good sense of what that relates to contextually, not just simple keyword searching. So we get an article, and now this actually little window or widget on the right-hand side follows me along and allows me to close that request, me as the end user here. So if this did in fact close my request, I'd hit close my request. That agent that perhaps is looking at that ticket right now just got notified, and he or she can move on to that next ticket within their playlist. All right, one more final thing I do want to touch on before we move into the back end of Zendesk. This idea of what we call a widget, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. So this widget is actually living on my help center, but quite commonly these are off on some other web domain, right? And the idea of the widget is that we want to take that entire, well, pretty much everything I've just talked about right now, from knowledge to submitting a request to getting in touch, and packaging that up into a little remote device. Now, one flavor of that is this idea of AnswerBot, which offers similar functionality to what we just showed in submitting the request, where I'm accessing knowledge. This is, again, where you might want to use your imagination. This widget would maybe be on my .com or in a portal or in an intranet or in my proprietary web software. So again, so my end user doesn't have to come out into this dedicated web portal. They can access all of that information directly within this window. Of course, the other flavors within here are the capabilities to get in touch, live chat, request a callback, or leave a message. All right, I lied. One more quick thing I want to talk about before we hop into the back end. Very quickly, but this is also a great way for that end user, that consumer, to access all of their historical requests, right? Let's say if I routinely contact you, oftentimes this link is even sent in an email response. Hey, Asa, we've received your request. Here's a link to go look at all of your requests, and you can track their statuses and updates within directly that interface. I will say most commonly end users just typically will communicate through an email, but that thread, that back and forth, is all contained within their own little private inbox that they have within this portal as well. All right, I'm going to move over into, again, what I call the back end of Zendesk. Technically, we do call this the agent interface. So I'm going to assume that everyone I'm talking to today on the call, the attendees, have not seen the back end. So we're going to sort of dumb this down a little bit just to make sure everybody's aware of the core basics and fundamentals. I do want to show at some point within this, some of the kind of administrative functionality and how easy it is to configure and set up, not only on that initial setup process, but arguably more importantly, is when we do need to make continual updates and maintain and adjust day by day as changes come into our business processes. So when we first land in Zendesk, we land in what we call our views. So think of these as kind of inboxes, right? Very fine tunable, right? Show me only tickets that are Spanish speaking, that have the keyword password reset in them, that are at this status level, that are from this type of customer, and they've selected this information, and they're approaching an SLA breach. So like lots of billions of different combinations of how you might construct out these views. Also be aware too that these views are going to be shared across teams as well, right? So within Zendesk, we have this concept of what we call groups. Think of them as teams, right? Just poolings of agents, tier 1 support, tier 2 support. So also note through this that I am a super user in this account. I'm maybe the main admin of this account. I get access to everything. So just keep that in mind too. My view that I see is a bit more complex than what the everyday agent would have access to within here. So I'm going to pop into a ticket and we'll go through what some call the anatomy of the ticket. This also is a great way to kind of communicate our data model natively within Zendesk. We have much more complex variations to this, but natively within Zendesk, our data model exists as ticket fields. We're going to talk about user fields. So this is my end user and all of his historical requests, which of course, Alvin is a bot here. So we're seeing a lot of the repeat messages coming through. Right, so no matter the channel that Alvin communicates through, in fact, we might have numerous email addresses, numerous phone numbers associated to him, his Twitter account. Of course, when he's text messaging, when he's chatting with us, all of that consolidates into one single, what many call a baseball card view of that user. This is usually a good point to talk about how we might integrate into some existing, for example, CRM system or ERP database, or just our own internal database. If it's internal employees, maybe this is pulling from Active Directory, right? These live natively here in Zendesk, but again, oftentimes these might get controlled in a system of record that lives externally. But what's great about the data that we see here, just keep this in mind, is that we can do things like filter views off of this information, of course, perform triggers and events off of this information. If a ticket comes in from a VIP, set their SLA policy at this versus that. And the third tab is what we call an organization. A lot of other systems call these accounts, but this is just a pooling of end users, right? So it's all of my customers that I work with at Nike. And just like custom user fields, I've got access or the ability to create custom organization fields as well too. Again, those can also be actionable and triggerable there. So let's pop back into the ticket here. And of course, this is where the conversation does take place. So we'll see my thread down below. Now, this is just the condensed view of that thread, but what's great about Zendesk is I can explode that out and get a full view of all of the events that might take place behind the scenes. So, right, if Graham came in and he was an agent, he worked on this ticket and he reassigned it, responded back, or changed the tag, I can see those fine details within here to make sure that the audit history is correct and accurate if we ever need to come back to those events that take place. You can see answer bot. Again, I won't get too in the weeds on what that is today, but that's also being triggered at this point as well. Now, I'm going to go through on the left-hand side very quickly, but essentially these are the ticket properties. Of course, classifications, who it's assigned to, right? So if I wanted to very quickly reassign this over to the billing department, I could send it over to everybody, or let's just send it right over to Aaron. If I ever need folks to be followers or sort of subscribers around certain types of issues, I'd even have a trigger that says every time a ticket comes in and it relates to this product set, also CC this individual manages that product. Right, a lot of different ideas we might use those followers within that. Those forms, we saw it on the front end. If you're paying attention, these are actually replicated back here on the back end too. In fact, we might even have some forms and fields that we don't expose out externally. We just keep those internally for ourselves to maybe go through some internal processes. They can also be smart enough to be conditional and say, right, if it's related to this particular field, we might expose out and show new fields, right, to make those fields much smarter and easier for that agent to go through. That said, if you're doing things right, many of your workflows should be managed through what we call macros down below. So yes, oftentimes people may call these responses. In this case, it's an email response, but it's a great way for us to just provide libraries for agents of responses as well as workflows. So in this case, let's go through a simple scenario. I've got a password reset issue. I know they're on a mobile device. I know they use an iPhone. So we respond with this message. Not only do we include the message, of course, I can customize this if I wanted to, but we're also including dynamic field here too. So this is actually smart enough to know that, based off of some information we know he's part of Nike, this is his account ID, this is his account manager. So we're inserting that dynamically. So it's a time saver, giving us consistency around the messaging for those agents. I will say, and I don't know if we're gonna have time to cover this, but in theory, this response could have been automatically performed and sent out via what we call a trigger. What the macros are great for is to give that agent that control to those responses. And of course, they can customize it and personalize this as they go through it. But we could have said, if we recognized maybe, for example, the keyword within that email message, password reset, we automatically just send this response back. the macro not only includes the response, but on the left-hand side, you might not be able to see this, but these lightly shaded blue fields were also controlled by that macro. So I showed these earlier, but if you're doing it right, many of your workflows, your processes should be just dumbed down into those macros. The agent doesn't have to think through, and every time we go down this process, we need to assign it to that agent. We need to CC the account managers. We need to include some tags so my boss can then report on it down the road, right? All these things that not every agent is going to think about every time is just being controlled very easily and quickly with those macros. All right, now I had this closed down. I want to take 2 minutes maybe just to talk about what we call apps. If you Google Zendesk and apps, you'll find our marketplace. There are about 900 apps out there today that are just publicly available. Think of apps as your own little custom tool belt. And I should clarify that this would be unique to each of your users. So let's say if I've got some people in our billing department, they're only going to see the apps and tools that relate to their tasks and duties that they require. But the tool belt is totally customizable. Many of those apps are very plug and play, right? Take 5 seconds to install, like the time tracking app. Really helpful, right? Show me down to the second how much time is this agent spending on this type of issue versus another agent. How much time is this customer taking up versus another customer taking up. A lot of CRMs that work with our app framework. The other idea to be aware of is that this is a very open framework, which means you guys have control to build and customize these apps out as you'd like. Of course, that's also where Graham's team comes into play too, where we can get creative and really design out sort of this little product that lives within Zendesk to suit your needs. If it's an integration into maybe a proprietary database or maybe a tool that you wanted to build within Zendesk, it's a very open and sort of a creative framework to work off of here. All right, I do got to touch a little bit on, let's see, we got 6 minutes left, touch a little bit about maybe some configuration aspects. One thing I do want to kind of call out, let's say if I was an agent and I spent a lot of time in building out this response and I really like this response and I want to reuse it, right? I've gone through all this time. We can actually very quickly create a macro simply from this view that'll carry all of that information over into the settings, right? And this is our settings area. And this is just one example. We're going to kind of go through it. I would give it a name, but it's storing all that information from that ticket that we have. And I just quickly save that. Of course, you can create macros from scratch, which is very easy to do. I'm going to start with actually a trigger. And we'll kind of, because I've sort of told this story a few times throughout this, but very commonly used. And think of a trigger as an if this, then that type function. Right? If a ticket comes in and it meets these conditions, we're going to perform this action or those actions, right? Might be numerous actions. So, of course, even responding back to a customer, that's in fact a trigger, right? Notify the requester that we've received that request. Some of these are in fact default ones that we provide just straight out of the box that are just very commonly used. But other scenarios like, and this is exactly the story I've been kind of talking about every once in a while, right? If we see an issue related to login issues, now what I do want you to understand here, and kind of as we follow along, is once we learn how to create, for example, a trigger here, you're going to know how to create a macro. You're going to know how to create an automation and SLA in Zendesk because it follows this exact same workflow and the same UI across all of our settings. And in this example, of course, with a trigger, we just kind of got to think through logically, right? What are the conditions that need to be met for us to perform these actions within that trigger? Right? I want the ticket to be created, or when a ticket is created, and the form equals technical support, and it contains, or actually does not contain these tags. And in fact, this case, someone's kind of worked it up to where we want to filter out unsubscribes and people who don't want those email notifications. And language is English, and tags contain password reset, and the comment is public. We then perform these actions. Well, actually, we've got some and or operators. That's our any. And then we perform these actions. In this case, we're automatically adding a tag, setting the group to tier 1, changing the form to general support, and responding back to the customer with this message, and even adding a follower here. So it's very easy. You can see that there's billions of different combinations in how we might construct out a potential macro within here. Another common setup that many of our customers will set up, and in fact, this is actually a great example of many competitors or other systems that are alternatives in the space, maybe have a little bit more difficult time of setting up SLA policies. For us, it's literally 1 or 2 clicks, to be honest, right? So in our world, an SLA is basically those who don't know, I want to categorize a certain set of tickets differently amongst the rest of the crowd. If I've got some customers that are VIPs, our response times are going to be held to different standards, right? So based on the the priority that they tell us, we are going to have, for example, if it's an urgent request from a VIP, our first reply time is going to be 1 hour, high priority, 2 hours, normal 12 hours, etc. So it's very easy to just input in the time frames down here. But again, same idea of what we saw with those triggers, same idea. If channel is web form, if channel is email. In fact, this is actually our general request. So this is our general SLA. Everybody adheres to this. If they do not meet these qualifications, then they might fall into one of the other SLAs, like our VIP customers. Right? Customer VIP is checked. Those particular individuals, we have to abide by these SLA policies. All right, I do want to touch in the last 2 minutes I've got on our reporting capabilities and specifically what we call our Explore product. So Explore is, think of it as a true business intelligence product baked into Zendesk. We've got a couple different sort of tiers or pricing options and models, but every single account does have access to, well, if you look at these Z or Zendesk logoed dashboards, these are our pre-built dashboards ready to go. Again, these come in every account. So I'll be frank, many of our customers just find these adequate and they don't necessarily need the full-blown version of Explore. You can see a lot of different sort of categories of reports, tickets by efficiency, agent level reports, SLAs, satisfaction. I can't, of course, get through all of these today. But really the power in Explore is when we look at Explore Pro, which offers up the capability to customize and build our own reports. So that's why I kind of planted those seeds earlier about the data model, because all the data that we've been talking about, we then have access to within Explore to do things like, this is where we get creative and dream up a report that we've never even thought of, but it's very unique and specific to your use case, or maybe more importantly, what your manager is asking for. So this is a very, very flexible tool that allows us to then sort of dream up those reports. Not only can we create the individual reports, of course, but the dashboards themselves are very customizable. So if I wanted to sort of skin this and make it look a certain particular way, you could certainly do that. I'll actually come in and edit this guy very quickly. I've got 0 minutes left, but this is actually the report builder that does give us that kind of creative ability to say, show me all of our tickets and the time spent. And, instead of broken out in a pie chart, I'd prefer it in a table, or instead of a table, maybe a bubble pack, right? Again, just scratching the surface on what can be done here. But the core idea of Explore is that take all that data that we've been sort of building and getting, consistent across by using those clean workflows into the system so that we can then make decisions and understand trends much better. All right, I think I hit my 10-minute mark just on time there and got through at least the core basics of what I wanted to do. Again, this is just scratching the surface, so hopefully those of you that are interested, we're more than happy to kind of go through a much more deeper dive in follow-up calls too.
Thanks so much, Graham and Asa. So at this time, we're going to open up for some questions. So if you have any questions based on what we heard today from Graham or Asa, feel free to drop those into the Q&A section of the webinar now. It looks like we have one question in regards to using the forms within the widget as Adam is using a WordPress site. Asa, is there any information that you can provide on how to use the forms within the widget?
Yeah, so specifically, well, two options with WordPress. There is a WordPress plugin. So essentially, you could use a WordPress form and push that into Zendesk as a ticket. That might be an option. But you could also, this widget here is just about, well, maybe 5 lines of JavaScript right now. It just needs to get copied into any HTML head of a website. So this widget, yeah, in fact, this particular flavor, I do believe, depending on who set this up, one of the flavors or options that we have to communicate is actually through a form. So, use your imagination. This widget here could live in a WordPress page, or like I said, you could also Google Zendesk and WordPress, and you'll find access to that plugin that they offer too.
Great. Thanks so much, Asa.
But
So at this time, it looks like that was the only question that we received. So we are going to go ahead and conclude the webinar. But if you have any questions or are interested in migrating or implementing to Zendesk, feel free to reach out to Graham at 729 Solutions via email. And give me just 1 second and I will provide you all with his contact information.
Thanks, Kate. And for those of you who don't feel like writing that extensive email, you can just do Graham at 729.io, India Ocean. That's my quick email. And anyone's welcome to just reach out to me if you've got any questions, you're thinking about it, you want some advice. My door's always open.
Thanks so much, Graham, and also thank you, Asa. And thank you to all of you for spending this last hour with us. We know you're all extremely busy, but we look forward to working with you soon. Thanks so much. Bye
Thanks,
for now.
Have a great day. Stay safe.